rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of men and women, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have called to the performance of important trusts in these islands. Father, let your blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and of those whose interest you have committed to our charge. And this we beg in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Please be seated. Item number 2, the confirmation of minutes. Vice President Kieran Bell, you have the floor.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, 2nd March 2023 be taken as read.
Is there any objection to that motion?
Madam President, I move that the minutes of Wednesday, 2nd March 2023 be confirmed.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The minutes are confirmed. Thank you, Vice President Kieran Bell. Item number 3, messages. Mr. Sumner.
Yes, Madam President, we have a message from the Honorable House of Assembly. The message reads, to the Honorable the President and members of the Senate, the House of Assembly has the honor to forward herewith the undernoted bill for the concurrence of your House, the Appropriation Act 2023. Copies of the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2023-24 are also forwarded for the information of your House. Signed, the Honorable Dennis P. Lister, JPMP Speaker. That's dated March 13th, 2023. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Sumner. Item number 4, reports of committees. There are none. Item number 5, announcements. I would just like to inform senators that Senator Leslie Robinson has indicated she will not be present. And the other announcement is the Commonwealth Day message from His Majesty, and I would like to read it. Senators, I wish to announce that Commonwealth Day was celebrated on Monday, the 13th of March, 2023, and as is customary, the annual Commonwealth Day message from His Majesty King Charles III was distributed to all Commonwealth nations and parliaments for the information of members. Senators, you can access a copy of the message on your tablets or on the Parliament website. Additional announcements. Senator Owen Darrell, spokesman for the Cabinet and government leader in the Senate, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning.
Madam President, I hereby present for the information of the Senate the 2022 annual report of the Information Commissioner's Office submitted in accordance with provisions of Section 58(1) of the Public Access to Information Act 2010.
Thank you. The next announcement is in the name of Senator Hudson, the Junior Minister of Finance. Senator Hudson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I hereby present for the information of the Senate the following reports. The annual report of the Bermuda Public Accountability Board for the fiscal year ended March 31, 2022, and the audited financial statements of the Bermuda Public Accountability Board for the fiscal year ended March 31, 2022. Madam President, I also present for the information of Senate the annual report of the Bermuda Hospital Board for the fiscal year ended the 31st of March, 2018. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hudson. The next announcement is in the name of the Junior Minister of Economy and Labor, and Senator Lindsay Simmons, you will speak on that.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the Economic Investment Residential Certificate Policy as made by the Minister responsible for immigration pursuant to Section 32(5) of the Bermuda Immigration and Protection Act 1956 and made effective the 31st of March 2023 by order of the Minister. Senators can access copies of the policy on their tablets and/or on the parliamentary website. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. I would also like to recognize a former senator in the gallery, and that's Senator Jones. Welcome to you, sir. Good to see you. Moving on with our agenda now, it's item number 6, notices of motion. And we do have a few. The first one is in the name of Senator Ariana Hudson, the Junior Minister of Finance. Senator Hudson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I hereby present for the consideration of Senate the draft regulations entitled the Government Fees Amendment Regulations 2023, proposed to be made by the Minister of Finance under the provisions of Section 2 of the Government Fees Act 1965, and I give notice that at the next day of meeting, I will move that the said draft regulations be approved. Madam President, I hereby present for the consideration of Senate the draft regulations entitled the Government Fees, Trademarks, and Service Marks Amendment Regulations 2023, proposed to be made by the Minister of Finance under the provisions of Section 2 of the Government Fees Act 1965, and I give notice that at the next day of meeting, I will move that the said draft regulations be approved.
Thank you, Senator Hudson. The next notices of motion are in the name of Senator Dr. Emily Dill, Junior Minister of Transport. Senator Dill, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I hereby present for the consideration of Senate the following draft regulations. The Marine and Ports Authority Pilotage Dues Regulations 2023, proposed to be made by the minister responsible for marine and port services under the provisions of Section 71 of the Marine and Port Services Act 2021. The Marine and Ports Authority Port Dues Regulations 23, proposed to be made by the minister responsible for marine and port services under the provisions of Section 40 of the Marine and Port Services Act 2021, and the Marine and Ports Seaborne Services Regulations 2023, proposed to be made by the minister responsible for marine and port services under the provisions of Section 65 of the Marine and Port Services Act 2021. And I give notice that at the next day of meeting, I will move that each of the said draft regulations be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dill. Item number 7, petitions. There are none. Item number 8, statements. We have one statement this morning, and that is in the name of the Honorable Owen Darrell, the Minister of Youth, Culture, and Sport, and Government Leader in the Senate. Senator Darrell, you have the floor.
Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning.
Madam President, in the 2021 National Youth Policy, the government underscored a 5-year commitment to develop and empower Bermuda's youth. The policy highlights the need to develop and empower Bermuda's youth. The Ministry of Youth, Culture, and Sport, through the Department of Youth, Sport, and Recreation, will advance these initiatives, which aim to increase employment entrepreneurship opportunities in the following ways. Madam President, the government's annual Summer Day Camp program is now in its 52nd year. As we've spoken before, it's a very popular program, which employs around 180 individuals and hosts hundreds of young people across a number of camp locations, from east to west. The department has started the process of recruitment for enthusiastic, fun-filled, and hardworking individuals for various positions. The positions available are supervisors, assistant supervisors, counselors, specialist counselors in the areas of art, dance, and sport, as well as paraeducators. The department wants to note, Madam President, that the applicants must be 18 years and above to apply and have a valid CPR, first aid, and SCARS certification. The department's Summer Day Camp program ensures students studying in the education or humanities have an opportunity to work in the field of their studies. So we encourage interested individuals who wish to be part of our team to visit the online platform www.sdcjobs.bm and apply. The deadline is Friday, March 17th, 2023. I just want to point out, Madam President, that is this Friday.
Mhm.
Madam President, the department is very cognizant that our camps cannot meet the needs of all and are limited in space and time duration. This is why that goal number 4, the National Youth Policy, the aim is to encourage and promote entrepreneurship. To that end, the Department of Youth, Sport and Recreation will host its first annual day camp conference on Saturday, the 25th of March, 2023 at the Bermuda College. The conference is for current and potential camp operators. This day-long interactive conference will focus on practical and hands-on facilitations to ensure attendees leave with the skills and tips to enable their teams to perform to the peak of their abilities and to push the boundaries in delivering high-quality service and inclusive camps. Madam President, the Department of Youth, Sport and Recreation's Day Camp Conference will be delivered in collaboration with the Department of Child and Family Services, the Coalition for the Protection of Children, WinReach, Tomorrow's Voices, and the Department of Health. These collaborations will ensure that the training provided is delivered by key persons who are hands-on in their industry. There will be a session on the following: building positive relationships, working with children with exceptionalities, safeguarding children, and safety matters. Additionally, there will be a breakout session where attendees can choose between the following: marketing your camp, being resourceful with art, out-of-the-box games, and developing youth through sport. Each attendee will receive an electronic resource package, including information from each session and a toolkit on things you need to do to run your camp successfully. Madam President, as our camp operators start to prepare for the busy 2023 summer camp season, the department will to ensure that all are adequately prepared to have the tools to run successful camps. To register for this free conference, visit our website at www.youthandsport.bm or call the Department of Youth, Sport and Recreation for more information. Lastly, Madam President, after the camp conference, the Department of Youth, Sport and Recreation will host a camp expo the following day on Sunday, March 26, 2023, also at the Bermuda College Gymnasium from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. If there are any parents looking for camps for their children and do not know where to start, we have a one-stop shop to ease parents' needs. The expo's purpose is to give parents of campers the opportunity to explore other camps and summer activities for their children. Parents can visit booths to receive information about camps that specialize in art, dance, STEM, and more. For more information on summer employment opportunities, the Camp Conference for Entrepreneurs, and the Camp Expo for Parents, please visit our website at www.youthandsport or call 205-0555. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Minister Darrell. Moving on with our agenda, item number 9, introduction of bills. There are none. Item number 10, the first reading of public bills. The following public bills have been received from the Honorable House of Assembly and are now read for the first time. Their titles are respectively the Appropriation Act 2023, Governor's recommendation signified, the Fire Safety Amendment Act 2023, the Police Amendment and Validation Act 2023, the Public Holidays Amendment and Validation Act 2023, the Municipalities Amendment Act 2023, the Land Tax Amendment Act 2023, the Stamp Duties Amendment Act 2023, the Customs Tariff Amendment Act 2023, the Payroll Tax Amendment Act 2023, the Public Treasury Administration and Payments Amendment Act 2023. Item number 11, private bills, there are none. Item number 12, question period. Senators, we will now entertain questions on the statement that has been given by Minister Darrell. Would any senator care to speak, Senator? Sorry, excuse me, my throat. Yes. Senator Smith, you have the floor. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to thank the minister for providing us this update and information to not only campers, but people that are interested in getting involved with the camp, the young people that we could get employed, and also parents that would be interested in having their children take part. I think it's important that we have these opportunities in the summer to have our young people participate in a healthy and structured program that allows them to enjoy themselves at the same time that they're going to learn different things over the summer. I just have a couple of questions. The main one really is that I noticed that there was specific mention of the age 18 years old. I was just wondering if the minister was able to give us any clarity on whether there was any way of having a program for maybe students that are 16 to 18. And the reason I asked that question is because a lot of times, if you could start to prepare those young people for these jobs, finding out whether they're interested in being part of the important initiatives that were laid out here, this might be the opportunity to structure something for them to learn so that when they are 18, they're prepared to be able to take on these jobs that are going to be available. Whether it is a junior counselor, something to that effect, because they are able to take the SCARS course at 16. They are able to participate and learn a lot of the skills and protection that we're going to need. It would be important for us to also give them an opportunity to kind of get their feet wet of what these jobs would be. These might be our future teachers. These might be people that are going away to school, and what we want is to build a structure for them to come back and be a part of. So if the minister could just give us a little bit of information on why that decision is that way, and whether there is another program that would support our young people to develop them towards being able to take these jobs, I think that would be helpful. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Ben Smith, opposition leader in the Senate. Yes. Senators, minister would like to hear any other questions that senators may have. Senator Tucker, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And again, thank you to the minister for bringing this statement. I mean, I think it's a really good initiative. I would just like to ask a couple of basic questions. I'd like to know the total number of spaces that are available within the camp. I think the public would like to know that. I'd also like to know an example of the types of needs that the camps will be unable to meet. And in addition, if there are any plans for any specialized camps for children, so children that have learning, behavioral, developmental needs, because that would be a good thing in my mind for parents to be able to have that additional support and the children for those specific types of areas.
That's your second question. Yes.
Yes.
You have a third?
Yes, just the cost of the camp, please. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Tucker, would any other senator care to ask questions on this statement? Hearing none, then it's over to you, Minister.
Thank you for your questions, and I'll answer them in order. Senator Smith, thank you very much for pointing that out. Believe it or not, when we had a briefing in the office and they talked about 18-year-olds, the first question I did ask was, well, what about junior counselors? And as you noted in my statement, 52 years this summer day camp has been around, and I think we all remember when there were junior counselors at the age of 16 who were getting paid as junior counselor. And at one point, there even may have been as young as 14-year-olds that were volunteering. Over 52 years, I'm sure much has changed in society. And the department has felt that, first of all, the demand to be counselors and to seek employment is really, really high now. And there are some individuals which I talked about who are entering the education field that are unable to get spaces in these camps. Secondly, we feel that it's a better place for 16-year-olds to go to workforce development, who have a full summer program that caters to 16-year-olds. And without going into the weeds and the details, in recent years, there have been a few unfortunate incidents and issues, and we felt that 18 would have been a safe space to start hiring. So that's the first question. So there are opportunities available again for 16-year-olds, but that's through the workforce development program that may have placements that are better suited for individuals just entering the workforce, other than working with essentially other children. The second question was, what is the number of total available camp spaces? The total number of spaces is 500. So throughout the camps, we have 500 spots available. And if you know anyone who has ever tried to register for camps, we put a website up and we tell everybody that camp registration will go live at 9 a.m. And by 9:07, I can tell you that my phone is ringing off, and the premier's phone is ringing off, and everyone else upset that I went on at 9:07 and there were no available spaces, and there's something got to be wrong with the website. That's actually not the case. That's how significant the demand is. So if you're 5 minutes past the registration time, we do start to put people on the wait list, which is why we talked in the statement about looking for other alternatives. And while we can't, the next question someone asks, and this ties into Senator Tucker's question, while we can't tell an entrepreneur what to charge for their camp, at this junction, we're at least making other opportunities available and highlighting other camps outside of the Summer Day Camp program. And to Senator Tucker's question, the registration fee for Summer Day Camp, and this would explain why registration is completely full by 9:05, is $60. So it's $60 per week to attend government Summer Day Camp. So I think those are the questions that were asked, Madam President.
Thank you. Sorry, Senator Tucker, you have a supplementary question?
No, I just wanted clarity because I did ask about if there were any plans for specialized camps.
You did ask that, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
So you had another question? I'm sorry.
No, that's Senator Ben Smith.
Thank you, Madam President. So just following on, because in the minister's response to my question, he said that there's potentially more demand for these jobs than there will be. There are more people that want the jobs than the amount of jobs that are going to be available. So would the minister say that there's going to be a list of 18 plus that are in this area that potentially other camps could draw from? As an opportunity, what could happen is, say, we have this list of people that have been approved by the government, but we just don't have enough space within our programs to do it. But we're opening this up. We've done the vetting process for other camps, private camps, to be able to take in these young people, to give them that opportunity, because there will be more camps than just the government camps. And it would be important for us to give that opportunity and share that information so that, one, these camps now have access to qualified and hardworking young people. At the same time, these people get the experience. So if the minister can let us know whether that is a possibility, and if so, where can camps look to find that list? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a question and a supplemental.
I'll answer them backwards. And How dare anyone say that we don't have collaboration in the Senate, Madam President, because that is an excellent suggestion. And as the registration does close this Friday, which is March 17th, that gives us an entire week and a bit to sort through those applications. And I will pass that suggestion on to the director. And I think that is an excellent suggestion that at our camp conference and well, not the expo, but at the camp conference, I think that could be a workshop or portal that could be made available if other camp operators are looking for quality staff. So thank you. I want to go back to it just to tag on to another question that was asked, and we talked about camp availability. And quite frankly, we always find ourselves in a holding pattern based on the availability of schools and school buildings, which gets a little trickier now with the ongoing education reform and bringing on other schools. But once we get a clear indication from the Department of Education, as well as collaboration with Public Works as to what schools they're going to be working on, then we can decide how many schools we have available to put on somebody camp, which then may open up or decrease the amount of spaces that we have available. And the question about special camps, not only do we have a camp for students with exceptionalities, the answer is yes, we do. But we also have special camps for preteens. There's one called Boys to Men. There's another one that I think it was called Women to Ladies. So we do offer some summer day camp spaces for special programs outside of your traditional summer day camp that most people would be familiar with majority of these 52 years. And I'm actually made to understand that if camps contact the department, they have, and we have previously given resumes, if the person allows us to, and names of potential staff members that they can look into and research. So that has been done in the past. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you, Senator Sparks, and the questions. And I think that's been a very wholesome coverage of the statement. So thank you all. We're now moving on to item number 13, the orders of the day. And the orders of the day, item to be considered under provisions of Standing Order 25 with the suspension of Standing Order 71. And we have the Senate will initiate debate on the 2023-2024 estimates and revenue. Senator Ariana Hudson, Junior Minister for Finance, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the provisions of Standing Order 25 be granted so that Senate may now proceed with the second reading of the public bill entitled the Appropriation Act 2023.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill entitled the Appropriation Act 2023 be now read a second time, together with consideration of the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the fiscal year 2023-2024.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam
Carried.
President. Madam President, Bermuda stands at more than the dawn of a new fiscal year. No society has been immune to the socioeconomic impacts of the pandemic, foreign wars, inflation, or disruptions in supply chains. Our growth aspirations and the promise of renewal have been somewhat frustrated by these lingering trials, but even in the midst of such unprecedented challenges, Bermuda, this jewel of the Atlantic, has demonstrated a determination to defy the odds. Madam President, amidst the very real hardships that our people are experiencing, there is cause for hope. This budget will use the mechanism of public financing to harness that hope by investing in people, advancing critical infrastructure projects, and continuing the work of change demanded of this government. Madam President, the Bermuda Progressive Labor Party has always been about the politics of hope. It is a mantra set out by the first PLP Premier, Dame Jennifer Smith, and has been the guide for all those who would offer themselves for public service under our banner. In a 1997 speech to the then International Companies Division of the Bermuda Chamber of Commerce, Dame Jennifer said this: "A progressive Labour Party government will create a Bermuda in which the government will not only serve the people, but we will rekindle hope, heal its present divisions, and replace apathy and alienation with vigor and a feeling of oneness and unity. We will work steadfastly to create a Bermuda in which one can grow up healthy, enjoy old age, and live to see children and children's children do better than they did. We will work for justice in the workplace. We will work for a more peaceful and peaceable community so we can once again feel safe on our streets and in our homes." Madam President, that call to action, that vision, applies equally today as it did 26 years ago when Dame Jennifer said it. This 2023-2024 budget addresses the complexities of the 21st century's changed demands while staying true to the core ideals that the people of Bermuda have endorsed in 5 of the past 6 elections. Madam President, the year 2022 was one of challenges. Geopolitical conflict, inflation, a food supply crisis, supply chain bottlenecks, and the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic have caused shockwaves across the global economy. The International Monetary Fund estimates that the global economy will grow by 3.4% in 2022, slow to 2.9% in 2023, and then rise to 3.1% in 2024. Growth in advanced economies is expected to decline sharply from 2.7% in 2022 to 1.2% in 2023, before rising to 1.4% in 2024. The United States' growth is projected to fall from 2% in 2022 to 1.4% in 2023 and 1% in 2024. On the other hand, growth in emerging markets and developing economies is projected to rise modestly from 3.9% in 2022 to 4% in 2023 and 4.2% in 2024. Global inflation is expected to fall from 8.8% in 2022 to 6.6% in 2023 and 4.3% in 2024. Madam President, in addition to projections of slowing economic growth and lower inflation for 2023, we are generally expecting higher global interest rates and tightened monetary conditions. Favorable scenarios include a boost in spending from pent-up demand and faster disinflation. Overall, inflation is expected to continue on a downward trend as international fuel and non-fuel commodity prices decline due to weaker global demand. The tightening of monetary policy is expected to continue putting downward pressure on core inflation, and easing in advanced economies' labor markets is expected to moderate wage inflation. As consumer preferences revert to services, prices of goods are expected to fall. Madam President, the pandemic has created an environment of higher debt levels, lower growth, and higher borrowing costs, placing many emerging and developing economies at a high risk of debt distress. This exacerbates the vulnerability of these economies as global interest rates continue to increase. Further, an escalation of geopolitical tensions could lead to disruptions in the global supply chain, resulting in upward pressures on the prices of goods such as energy and food, and the possibility of tighter monetary conditions. Navigating 2023 requires the prioritization of actions to reduce inflation, contain the reemergence of COVID-19, ensure financial stability, restore debt sustainability, address supply chain constraints, and strengthen multilateral cooperation. Madam President, on to the domestic economy. Bermuda's gross domestic product, the primary indicator for economic growth, is estimated to have grown between 3.4 and 3.9% in 2022. In 2022, Bermuda saw signs of economic growth supported by a rebound in quarterly GDP data in the first half of the year. Positive economic performance was fueled by new international business registrations, visitor spending, higher employment income, greater levels of household consumption, and increased construction activity, indicating a continued trajectory of economic recovery. As we've heard, Bermuda continues to see growth in international business. 2022 saw 812 new company incorporations and a 5.2% increase in jobs, with 230 new jobs being filled. I am happy to report that for the second consecutive year, the majority of the new posts were actually filled by Bermudians rather than guest workers, proving that the balanced policies of the Bermuda Progressive Labour Party government create the catalyst for growth in IB and ensure Bermudians benefit from that growth. This sector now provides 4,642 jobs within our economy and is the single largest economic activity group. Madam President, with the continued easing of border restrictions, the travel industry globally showed signs of a rebound in 2022. And Bermuda's tourism sector reflected that, as demonstrated by a significant improvement in air visitor and cruise visitor spending. We saw an increase in employment levels by 6.3%, bringing the total number of jobs in the accommodation and food services sector to 3,629. Madam President, the construction industry in 2022 showed a decline in both building permits and planning applications. However, during the first 3 quarters, the value of new projects started grew from $83.4 million in 2021 to $100.6 million, an increase of 20.6%. This figure for the first 3 quarters of 2022 surpasses the last 3 years' annual totals and is above the pre-pandemic levels of 2019. This signifies a strong recovery within the sector, which also saw jobs increase by 1% in 2022. Madam President, despite the increasing inflationary pressures experienced throughout 2022, Bermuda's overall rate of inflation remains relatively low compared to advanced economies, as reflected in the Consumer Price Index, which indicates an annual inflation rate of 3.8% for November of 2022. The overall rate notwithstanding, food price inflation is still registering at 10.4%. However, the current trend of inflation indicates that it has peaked and is beginning to abate. Madam President, Bermuda's balance of payments continues to record relatively large current account surpluses, which are an important strength in the Bermudian economy. Bermuda's total current account surplus over the first 3 quarters of 2022 was recorded at $926 million. This figure is 25.8% more than the $736 million recorded over the first 3 quarters of 2021. Madam President, sustainable economic growth cannot be achieved without an expansion of jobs within our economy and a reduction in unemployment levels. In 2022, the total number of jobs filled in Bermuda increased by 402 posts, or 1.3%, from 31,316 in 2021 to 31,718. This rebound in employment levels in the Bermudian economy comes as a result of the robust growth in the IB sector, our recovering tourism sector, and the professional, scientific, and technical sector, which collectively represented 76.1% of the total new jobs filled in 2022. For the second consecutive year, Madam President, the job positions in public administration have declined. The number of jobs filled went from 4,008 in 2021 to 3,883 in 2022, recording a decrease of 3.1% or 125 jobs. Madam President, strong growth was observed in employment income for the first 3 quarters of 2022. It is estimated to have increased by 6.6% or $180.6 million when compared with the same period in 2021. This increase was driven by the international business sector, which saw an increase of $94.3 million or 8.9%. Despite the uptick in inflation, both personal consumption and the retail sector showed signs of growth in 2022. Household personal consumption for the first 3 quarters of 2022 was estimated to be $2.97 billion, reflecting an increase of 17.5% or $441.7 million over 2021. Total gross turnover in the retail sector stood at $990.6 million, which represents a 3.1% increase when comparing the first 10 months of 2022 against 2021. Madam President, the positive growth across many major economic indicators signals a reversal of the downward trends experienced during the midst of the pandemic, with many indicators now nearing pre-pandemic levels. The growth of employment levels in our key sectors is evidence of increasing confidence in our economy. Inflation is downward trending, and tourism is on a trajectory to reach pre-pandemic levels. However, we face several external risks: higher global interest rates, supply chain disruptions, geopolitical tensions, and the impact of climate change and its correlation with our insurance industry. We must therefore remain focused on creating sustainable growth through economic diversification and the strengthening of our core sectors, such as international business. Madam President, the international business sector, particularly the insurance and reinsurance industries, continue to be the bedrock of our economy. In 2020, they showed their resilience by avoiding contraction and then followed that in 2021 with the fastest year of growth in 15 years. It should be acknowledged that much of Bermuda's economic stability during the peak of the pandemic and subsequent recovery, as evidenced by the consecutive quarters of GDP growth, is largely a result of the contributions of our most significant economic pillar. In 2021, the international business sector contributed over $2 billion to the island's economy, with the largest direct contribution being $235 million in payroll tax. However, the impact of the island's international business sector flows beyond payroll tax, as it also spent more than $74 million towards rent, $7 million on local entertainment, and they also donated $14 million to charities. It also provides educational scholarships and internships for young Bermudians. Madam President, the international business sector is also a significant contributor to job growth. Since 2019, jobs have consistently increased, with 591 additional jobs created in the last 3 years, representing growth of 14.7%. Madam President, this bodes well for our future and continues to reinforce our place as a leading international financial center. Madam President, an important aspect of credit ratings reviews is that they provide an independent and non-political evaluation of Bermuda's ability and willingness to serve its financial obligations. These ratings are viewed as a global affirmation of where we are economically and a metric to sustain existing business and attract new business to the island. Madam President, we are pleased to see that 2022 S&P, Moody's, and KBRA all reaffirmed Bermuda's strong sovereign credit and senior unsecured debt ratings and maintained the outlook as stable. The ratings indicate that Bermuda's bonds are seen to be of good quality with a low credit or default risk and have been reinforced by positive comments about Bermuda's growth prospects. Madam President, this 2023-2024 budget is not made in a vacuum. There is a context and a framing to the fiscal decisions made by this government, and that context demands that we conduct a careful examination of the past in order to better understand this present and the future. I wish to reaffirm the record of the Progressive Labor Party in managing the fiscal debacles left by the One Bermuda Alliance. And I want to do that because the context is critical to understanding just how significant this budget is to Bermuda and her people. Despite the hand we were dealt in 2017 with the failed Morgan's Point project and an unwise airport privatization that jointly have cost taxpayers over $250 million, I will take some time to remind the people of Bermuda of the progress that has been made despite a once-in-a-century pandemic. And Madam President, I will use this speech to make clear the difference in philosophy between this PLP government and the opposition. In July 2017, the people of Bermuda voted to change the direction of this country and entrusted the PLP to bring about that change. The people chose to put an end to one of the most divisive periods of recent memory and elected this government to build a better, fairer Bermuda. We are proud of what we have accomplished thus far, yet equally aware that more can, should, and must be done to ensure the dreams and aspirations represented by that resounding win at the polls in 2017 and to a greater extent in 2020 are realized. Governing through these unpredictable times has not been easy, and just as I can admit that we have not gotten everything right, I can assure the public that we have not lost sight of the mandate that we've been given and that we've made progress on the issues that matter to the people of Bermuda. Bermuda's high cost of living has been the primary issue of concern for voters, well before the recent price increases due to factors largely outside the control of the government. The world is experiencing the highest rate of inflation in 40 years, and though our overall inflation rate may be less than many other countries, we are already starting from a higher base price, and therefore, working people in this country feel the impact just as much as the rest of the world. The people of Bermuda expect their government to act to provide relief for the hardworking Bermudians and their families. Madam President, that is what we have done, and that is what we will continue to do. That is why we reduced payroll tax for working families from its highest level in history in 2016 under the opposition to the lowest level in history under this government. That's why in 2018, we reduced the duty on essential grocery items, and in 2022, we eliminated duty on essential goods while working with importers and grocers to ensure their savings were passed down to the customers. That's why we amended legislation to address banking fees to help put an end to unjust banking practices. And that is why we provided direct financial support to parents of public school students and delivered a payroll tax rebate for workers earning $96,000 or less. We have eliminated payroll taxes for disabled workers and eliminated land tax for registered charities and nursing homes. And that is why, while gas prices were soaring throughout the world, we acted to freeze local fuel prices to protect families and businesses against record oil prices. That is why, Madam President, this government also launched a flagship mortgage guarantee program, which will reduce mortgage rates for hundreds of Bermudian families. Bermuda seniors may have seen many decades come and go, but they have not forgotten that when requesting a pension increase to maintain their standard of living, the former government told them that money doesn't grow on trees. Our seniors can vividly remember being cast aside by the OBA during their 55 months of governing. And that is why in 2017, our seniors voted for a government that understands the challenges they face and will fight to ensure they can live out their golden years in the comfort they so richly deserve. That is why this government continues to increase our seniors' pensions at the rate of inflation and amend legislation to provide better standards in our care homes. That is why we expanded the personal home care benefit and introduced local radiation therapy coverage for future care and HIP. That is why we increased the future care prescription drug benefit from $2,000 to $3,000 a year and introduced interest-free loans of up to $15,000 for families who need help modifying their homes. And this is why this government also approved funding to increase the stock of affordable housing for our seniors. And yes, we recognize that we must continue to do more to help our seniors live in dignity. In 2017, our parents and students were discouraged by the state of the country's education system and the lack of opportunities the former government provided Bermudians to enhance their skills and further their education. Let us not forget that the former government reintroduced fees at the Bermuda College while cutting scholarships and shortchanging our public education system. This government has been committed to undoing the damage done by the opposition and restoring faith in our public education system. That is why we installed high-speed internet and Wi-Fi in all primary and middle schools and supplied all public primary school and M1 students with Chromebooks. That is why we provided funding for new mathematics programs, resulting in significantly improved outcomes in all of our primary schools. That is why we advanced the most significant public education reform in a generation and have successfully launched signature schools this year. That is why we ensured that every Bermudian who wants access to further education at Bermuda College can do so. That is why we increased scholarship funding for students attending overseas institutions and amended legislation to allow Bermudian students with an ACCA designation to be fully recognized as registered accountants in Bermuda. However, Madam President, we recognize that more can be done, and this budget will do more for public education. In 2017, the call from our union partners and other stakeholders was for the government to put forth policies that will protect the workers of the country as they are the driving force of our economy. That is why we provided government and hospital workers and teachers with their first pay rise since 2011, and why we will implement a minimum wage for the first time in this country, ensuring that all receive a basic level of pay for their work. That is why we have implemented the youth employment strategy to facilitate greater opportunities for young Bermudians. And that is why we introduced work permit moratoriums on 52 job categories, the most in Bermuda's history. And that is why we passed new labor legislation that strengthened trade unions while also increasing employee protections against bullying and sexual harassment. Again, Madam President, we recognize that more can be done, and this budget presented today will do more to advance the rights of workers in this country. We have decriminalized possession of up to 7 grams of cannabis and introduced a tax on dividend payments for the first time in history. We were the first government to implement roadside sobriety testing and the first to provide public notification when sex offenders are released after their prison sentence. Our record will show that we have awarded over $1 million in capital development grants to community clubs, breathing new life into these facilities. I could go on, Madam President, but as I've said, we recognize that more must be done, and this budget will do more to advance the progress the voters expect from their government. The people of Bermuda still vividly remember the One Bermuda Alliance doubling our national debt, having the largest deficits in Bermuda's history, and being downgraded by independent rating agencies. Bermudians are still feeling the effects of their failed Morgan Point project, bad airport deal, and furlough days. In 2017, Bermudians looked to the Progressive Labor Party to reduce our deficit, maintain our reputation as a global financial center, diversify our economy, and encourage more economic parity. Despite the bad hand that we were dealt and the devastating blows caused by the pandemic, this government is proud to see the policies we have put in place since returning to office begin to bear fruit with a growing economy, declining deficits, the strongest growth in our international business sector in 15 years, and sustained stable outlooks from rating agencies. We are also pleased to see our net debt position lower than forecasted, and we are still on track for a balanced budget in 2024-2025. What is vital for this trajectory to continue is for this government to be laser focused on creating the conditions required for continued economic growth in Bermuda. Madam President, our continued mission and goal is to further advance the cause of balanced and sustainable economic growth for the benefit of the people of Bermuda. Last year, we spoke about the need to focus on economic growth, and that is what this government has delivered. The economic growth we have seen this year has been built on the economic growth we also had last year. This means that we are successfully executing Bermuda's economic recovery plan, and in line with that plan, it is expected that Bermuda's GDP in 2022 will be back to pre-pandemic levels. Although that is good news, this economic recovery isn't touching all of our residents, and many feel that they are going backwards. It makes no sense to brag about positive economic statistics when people do not feel positive about their personal economic situation. Economic growth doesn't matter when any gains made in wages are eaten up by increasing food prices or increases in monthly mortgage payments. Bermuda's economic future is bright. Having returned to where we were before the pandemic, we must now look forward to growing the economy to ensure that it works for all Bermudians. We must move forward with optimism, knowing that Bermuda has weathered the economic storm of the pandemic, despite the challenges in our tourism sector due to the closure of our largest hotel. All of the facts and statistics indicate that our economy has continued to grow. Madam President, this is what our budget is about: economic growth. It is about making sure that we invest in our infrastructure, which is suffering after years of underinvestment. This budget is about ensuring that the people of Bermuda can build on the successes of the past, build on our successful navigation of the coronavirus pandemic, build on the successful execution of Bermuda's economic recovery plan, and build a secure future for all Bermudians. Madam President, the Economic Recovery Plan is a key feature of the government's comprehensive economic development strategy, which will be unveiled by the Minister of Economy and Labor in the coming months. The Economic Development Strategy will provide a strategic framework that will guide Bermuda to sustainable economic growth and development. The Economic Development Strategy contains strategic priorities and initiatives that will provide direction and drive the work plans of Bermuda's economic development organizations. In addition to the execution of the ERP, other strategic priorities include the retention and expansion of local and international business, increasing foreign direct investment, marketing Bermuda's value proposition and business ecosystem, developing local entrepreneurship, increasing the working population, and workforce development. The Economic Recovery Plan combines fiscal responsibility with a clear path to sustained economic growth, employment, and greater economic development. The plan was developed in 2020 in response to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and has progressed to phase 3 of its implementation. It is also worth noting that a dedicated project management office was established last year to ensure the 31 priority initiatives under the Economic Recovery Plan are implemented efficiently and in a timely manner. The team have been instrumental in progressing these initiatives as they monitor, track, report, and lend assistance where required. Madam President, when discussing the Economic Recovery Plan, it is also critical that we acknowledge the plan's benchmarks, which suggest that the successful implementation of the 31 priority initiatives should deliver 1.3% to 1.5% per year above baseline economic growth from 2023, leading to an improvement in Bermuda's fiscal position. I am encouraged to see the mentioned priority initiatives advancing well, with 80% on track and many already demonstrating positive results. For example, the Economic Investment Certificate, which to date has generated over $369 million through direct investment in the Bermuda economy, and the Work from Bermuda program, which has seen 1,139 applications approved. As of November 2022, 259 Work from Bermuda certificate holders remain on the island, positively contributing to our economy. Madam President, almost 9 years after the previous administration passed the Gaming Act, Bermuda does not have a casino. Amendments made since that time have not been enough to address the obstacles the team designed to prevent this industry from taking hold in this jurisdiction. What is clear is that having the integrated resort model as the only available option for casino operation in Bermuda is a flaw in the inherited regime. This law must be amended to permit potential casino operators to choose the model that best suits the intended venue for their casino. Likewise, the law must be amended to permit the Gaming Commission the flexibility to consider and grant licenses on that basis. To reinforce the regulatory responsibilities of the Commission, Madam President, these amendments will be accompanied by a revised definition of minister in the Act to establish the Minister of Finance as the minister, similar to the Bermuda Monetary Authority, and to allow the Commission more flexibility in application of regulatory requirements. It is anticipated that these changes will address impediments to operational and business support for gaming in Bermuda. Madam President, the number of patients seeking medical care outside of their home country, popularly called medical tourism, is growing at a rapid rate around the world, and Bermuda is uniquely positioned to take advantage of this opportunity. A committee of stakeholders, along with leading professionals, investigated this opportunity further, and given Bermuda's proximity to the U.S. and Canada, its desirable climate for medical treatment recovery, and its positive reputation for quality and standards, Bermuda was determined to be an ideal location for a world-class medical tourism facility. Madam President, this facility will create employment during the construction and operational phase. It will also benefit existing hospitality facilities and restaurants and lead to an increased usage of the airport and ground transportation. This will have a positive impact on Bermuda's GDP from the financial benefits of thousands of new tourists, resort fees, and medical professionals moving to and living on the island. It will also create opportunities for training Bermudians to fill technical positions within the new medical facility. We are pleased to have received interest from leading U.S. academic medical centers and foreign investors, and we anticipate making a further announcement on this initiative during the third quarter of 2023. This government continues to support small and medium-sized enterprises through the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, which has provided over $6 million in support through 334 local businesses in the forms of loans, grants, and guarantees. The Office of the Uptown Development Authority officially opened in September of 2022. The interim project team has been engaged with the Economic Development Department and the Bermuda Business Development Agency on the approved residential schemes and is in the early stages of connecting developers and investors with opportunities within the country's economic empowerment zones. This government is also acutely aware of the challenges we currently face concerning housing and is pleased to see the interest from developers in the approved residential schemes. The guidelines of the scheme allow for large-scale residential and mixed-use development in Bermuda's economic empowerment zones and also provide the opportunity for restricted persons to purchase units within the scheme. Madam President, the government also recently published a position paper regarding a minimum wage in Bermuda, which outlines what a minimum wage is, why it is necessary, and the proposed minimum wage rate of $16.40 to come into force on the 1st of June 2023. The government has also put in place a mortgage guarantee program as part of its work to lower interest rates. Madam President, we've invested in the construction of electric bus charging facilities at the Dockyard, St. George's, and Fort Langton bus depots in support of the fleet electrification program. Additionally, both the National Reemployment Strategy and Youth Employment Strategy are currently being implemented. The government, along with the Project Management Office, will continue to work with the private sector and other stakeholders to ensure the 31 priority items progress forward. The continued successful implementation of the Economic Recovery Plan initiatives will create better conditions for sustainable economic growth. Madam President, Bermuda's investment in digital assets has shown steady and positive progress. This year will mark 5 years since the passage of the Digital Asset Business Act 2018. Bermuda set the tone early by being one of the first countries in the world to have a comprehensive licensing regime for the digital asset industry. We've been gradually attracting companies, building experience in navigating the risk of this innovative new industry, and refining our regime. This strategy has borne fruit as Bermuda has developed a reputation for a clear, well-thought-out approach to the industry that differs from other jurisdictions attempting to build industries in this rapidly changing space. Consistent with our prudent and robust approach to regulation, Bermuda will carefully monitor developments in this space and appropriately adjust our approach as necessary. In parallel, Bermuda has seen strong growth in the digital asset insurance business through the innovative insurer regime introduced in 2019, with 8 licensed insurers working with digital assets. 4 of those licenses were issued in 2022, and they include what may be the world's first licensed insurer for digital asset life insurance. Companies in the sector have shown a promising and welcome commitment to Bermudian job growth. The impact of a strong commitment to Bermudian hiring cannot be understated, as these Bermudians are receiving training and experience that will be invaluable as the industry develops. This government is confident that despite the challenges, the digital asset industry will survive. Bermuda will work with regulators and industry players to achieve appropriate development of the sector in the context of robust and effective regulation. We will continue to build on our excellence in insurance innovation and regulation to promulgate and reinforce the positive impact of strong and effective regulation in this sector as well. As noted previously, Bermuda's economy relies heavily on the international business sector, in particular the insurance and reinsurance industry, thus making it vulnerable to external shocks. In an effort to make Bermuda more resilient to such risks, the government will further diversify financial services on the island, including the expansion of banking services that support key initiatives within Bermuda's economic recovery plan. The aim is to develop and implement a revised banking model for our country that reflects its uniqueness and is consistent with our reputation as a quality international financial center. To determine the appropriate way to balance national interests against commercial interests in the banking sector, a review was completed by the Bermuda Monetary Authority in 2022. That review's report is intended to assist the government in managing not only the risks that confront our economy, but also the challenges that consumers face from a lack of diversification in the banking sector. In support of the above, the report envisions that Bermuda's banking sector will include domestic and full-service banks, narrow-purpose banks, specialized international banks, and credit unions. The government is fully supportive of the introduction of these initiatives, and while incumbent banks have the competitive advantage of being more familiar with regulatory requirements, it is accepted that different innovations are required to enhance the banking experience in Bermuda. This is supported by the number of related banking sector initiatives currently underway within the Ministry of Finance, working together with the Bermuda Monetary Authority. In addition to banking sector diversification, work to further strengthen transparency and conduct related obligations are at advanced stages of the policy development process, with rules due to be tabled this year. Additionally, the government will support the Bermuda Monetary Authority in advancing open banking standards in Bermuda to provide better services to local consumers while enabling appropriate digital banking services to be offered. In October of last year, the government proudly launched its Mortgage Guarantee Program, a pilot program where the government provides a partial guarantee in support of local mortgages with Bermuda Commercial Bank. The government support reduces the risk to the bank, and in return, the bank is offering not only a reduced interest rate starting at 5%, but also a reduced down payment requirement from the standard 20% to 10%. We are now reaching the end of the first phase, and I am pleased to announce that young Bermudians are now on their way to earning their piece of the rock. Beginning on the 1st of April 2023, we will transition into phase 2 of the program, where public officers with mortgages at other institutions will be eligible to transfer them over and participate in the program, but this will not apply to mortgages where the public officer owns multiple properties or does not reside in the home. Also, as part of phase 2, we will remove the age restriction so that any Bermudian applying for a new mortgage is eligible. After 2 challenging years in the world of tourism, 2022 became a pivotal year for the sector. Following the wide-scale deployment of COVID-19 vaccines and boosters, visitors began to take advantage of the resurgence of both domestic and international travel. While Bermuda has not yet returned to 2019 visitor volumes, the island saw significant year-over-year growth in 2022 across key tourism measures, including air capacity, leisure air visitors, and cruise travel. When comparing 2022 to 2021, the total number of leisure air visitors was up 80%. Total air capacity increased by 50%, and total cruise arrivals were 2,735% higher. Those significant increases were seen in 2022. Year-end statistics underscore that more work remains to be done before reaching the baseline numbers of 2019. In 2023, the island can expect a historic increase in cruise arrivals, which will positively impact tax revenue and generate more visitor traffic to businesses at each port. This record cruise season will provide more funds to the Bermuda Tourism Authority's budget to execute on the National Tourism Plan. The island's hotel inventory has been a limiting factor, contributing to the challenge of securing a full return to 2019 air capacity levels. American Airlines service from Charlotte and British Airways London Heathrow Gateway were bright spots in 2022, allowing visitors additional connections throughout the U.S. and Europe. The Bermuda Tourism Authority will continue to support the Ministry of Transport through the Air Service Development Committee to identify needs, engage new and familiar partners, and create demand in order to make the case for expanded airlift as more hotel properties come online. Madam President, there's the continuing work of opening the Bermudiana Beach Hotel, the completion of Phase 2 for the reopening of the St. George's Club, and the progress of the aerial sands properties. It is clear that there is significant potential for increases in employment in the hospitality sector in the coming years. As indicated in November's throne speech, to support additional investment in Bermuda's tourism economy, the government will make amendments to the Tourism Investment Act to permit the government greater discretion in the granting of relief under the Act to developers and those investing in attractions, restaurants, and hotels. The aim of these amendments is to provide incentives for establishments to invest in upgrades and refurbishments for their properties, and in turn create jobs while enhancing the overall product available to visitors. The mission of this government is to create sustainable growth in Bermuda's economy and to do what we must to be competitive with other jurisdictions competing with Bermuda for tourism and investment. Right now, Bermuda is not competitive, and these changes will ensure that we attract investment to grow jobs and provide a brighter future for Bermuda's tourism sector. Madam President, the redevelopment of the Fairmont Southampton Hotel is eagerly awaited. In the months since we considered the legislation to support the project, lawyers, development consultants, bankers, and technical officers have been heavily engaged in the preparation of the various agreements that will provide the framework for financing and development. Further, Madam President, we will be invited to consider amendments to the Public Treasury Administration and Payments Act 1969 to strengthen the protections for the government of Bermuda in the provision of the $75 million guarantee of local lending to support the redevelopment project. The unique arrangement for the repayment of that loan requires our legislation to be modified to facilitate the structure of the loan agreement. Confidence remains high that construction will begin in the second quarter of this year, and in preparation for this commencement, the developers have been repricing construction costs. The volatility in capital markets delayed the confirmation of financing, but it is a testament to the developers and their investors' confidence in Bermuda that the capital for the project's completion has been secured. 2024 completion remains the target, and I can assure the people of Bermuda that all parties have demonstrably committed to advancing this project. Its economic importance has been magnified in recent years as we struggle to maintain key airlift and grow Bermuda's market share in the meeting and large group business. Madam President, late last year, we passed the Morgan's Point Company Bill to enable the people of Bermuda to take control of the property. I am pleased to note that we are now progressing the plans to create a reimagined Morgan's Point. Our advisors have thoroughly vetted and assessed a number of options and provided well-supported recommendations on the best use of the site. Based on all the analysis and advice given, the development will not include a hotel or condos for sale, but instead, we have targeted this mixed-use site for the development of a range of residential rental apartments, including a component for seniors housing, with an active and engaging amenities district filled with commercial retail and restaurant opportunities at its center and accessible to all. This plan represents productive and positive use of the asset, generating appropriate cash returns, and also addresses several long-standing key goals of this government regarding economic stimulus and increasing house supply. The plan will be executed in phases, and the rimming of the development will subject to existing real estate demand. We see the 37-acre Morgan's Point site and plan is based on commercial principles. However, it should also be viewed through an economic opportunity lens in the sense that this project will generate economic activity for the country, specifically in the western part of the island. Investment in Phase 1 will serve as a platform for future phases around the Morgan's Point land, and it is expected that future phases will likely drive a higher commercial output for the Bermuda government. Madam President, initial cost estimates for the first phase are $130 million. Discussions about the fundraising process will be run in parallel with the design and definition of cost elements. Our present assumptions on financing consist of two debt tranches, a combination of a senior debt tranche secured against Morgan's Point land and applicable assets as built, and a subordinated debt tranche provided by a local Bermudian bank backed by a government guarantee. Importantly, the construction and operation of Phase 1 will increase the value of the remaining land assets under the control of the government and serve as a land bank for future development. One of the most important and challenging matters that the government has to tackle this year is the effective implementation of the Global Minimum Tax Initiative, which has been advanced by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD. To achieve this aim, the Ministry of Finance has formed an international tax working group with specialists in international tax matters and representatives of various bodies whose members may be directly impacted by this work. The group is tasked with examining how Bermuda can appropriately implement this global agreement, taking into account the diversity and complexity of our international business sector. The global minimum tax will represent a fundamental change in the way that Bermuda does business and the way that Bermuda's government raises revenue. Madam President, the International Tax Working Group is set to report its findings and provide recommendations to the government in July. After that, the Tax Reform Commission will be impaneled to look at the changes necessary to our existing system of domestic taxation to ensure that it is in line with the requirements of the global minimum tax, while also examining what other changes to our local taxes are needed to ensure that Bermuda's economy remains competitive. Notwithstanding the perceived benefits, there will be risks to Bermuda's economy with the implementation of the global minimum tax, as there will be some companies that decide being in Bermuda is not the best option for them. Therefore, it is essential that we advance the reforms signaled by the Ministry of Economy and Labor to grow Bermuda's working population. Bermuda is regarded by some as an offshore jurisdiction, but as the global minimum tax sets standard tax rates throughout the world, we must adapt and become a midshore jurisdiction. When we refer to Bermuda becoming a midshore jurisdiction, it means that Bermuda must be a place where talented people from around the world desire to live and work. Simply put, we must make Bermuda a place that is more attractive for global talent looking to relocate so that they can assist in powering our island's economic growth into the future. I know that this perspective may cause fear in the minds of some Bermudians, and I understand why some may feel that way. Our costs are high, our labor market is tight, and people are nervous about their futures. However, Madam President, we cannot allow this fear to prevent us from doing what is necessary to fulfill our obligations to future generations. The Ministry of Economy and Labor has made it painfully clear what will happen if we are unable to grow our working population. Instead of further reductions in taxes, as we were able to deliver in this budget, due to the economy growing and our working population expanding, taxes in the future would increase. An increase in taxes will mean an increase in the cost of living in Bermuda, and this is something that Bermuda's residents and businesses simply cannot afford. While some will say that the government's approach is similar to that of the opposition, I could not disagree more, and I think it's important that we note the difference in approach between this PLP government and the opposition. This government recognizes the importance of wide, careful, and methodical consultation. And unlike the opposition, who sprang changes upon the electorate without any consideration, we kept our election promise to form a bipartisan committee on immigration reform, something our Minister of Finance called for back in 2013 when we were the opposition. That bipartisan committee worked through the first stages of comprehensive immigration reform that enabled us to make sure we eliminated the problem of mixed status families, made it easier for Bermudians born overseas to claim Bermuda status, and extended permanent residency to all long-term residents for the first time in this country's history. These changes have had a positive effect, but as the statistics show, we must do more and we must move quickly. As some will know, we are currently engaged in the vital process of consultation, and so I encourage all persons, particularly the opposition who have had a lot to say in the media, to participate in this process, because it is vital that all views are heard as we aim to expand our working population in Bermuda in a fair and balanced manner. Given the need to grow our working population, we must ensure that there is more housing for more people to live and work in Bermuda. Currently, there is an acute housing shortage, which is being driven by growth that we have seen in international business over the past few years. That is why this government is committed to providing $15 million over the next 3 years to build more affordable housing units, and why it has also delivered 48 units of affordable housing over the past 5 years. The transition of Morgan's Point to a residential community and the initial plan for 101 residential units will also provide additional housing in Bermuda for an expanding midshore economy. In 2019, the government changed the Economic Development Act to allow for the building of approved residential schemes to further expand the housing stock. Currently, approved residential schemes are restricted to the economic empowerment zones in Somerset, St. George's, and Northeast Hamilton. However, those areas have not seen the progress that we sincerely desired for this initiative designed to provide more housing units. Though the team at the BEDC continue to work diligently to advance this initiative, it is necessary that we expand the areas where approved residential schemes can be constructed. Therefore, Madam President, the government will advance a bill that will amend the Economic Development Act to expand the eligibility for approved residential schemes from solely the economic empowerment zones to the entire city of Hamilton. We must do everything in our power to provide a base for additional private sector investment to develop additional housing in Bermuda to complement the government's efforts to provide affordable housing. This change does not mean that we are abandoning our vision for a vibrant Northeast Hamilton economic empowerment zone. There will still be benefits to building approved residential schemes in Bermuda's economic empowerment zones that will not apply throughout the city of Hamilton. However, units in approved residential schemes in the city of Hamilton will now be able to be purchased by residents, businesses, and international persons without restriction. It is the duty of the government to look at what is working and to see what can be done better. And so, as we take concrete steps to increase the working population in Bermuda, we must ensure that this does not further raise the cost of housing, causing distress for many working families. This change will increase the available spaces that can be developed for approved residential schemes and incentivize the private sector to start developments that may have been stalled due to a lack of possible purchasers. From a fiscal perspective, the primary focus of this government is to continue on our path towards a balanced budget and to meet the target set by the Fiscal Responsibility Panel of a $50 million surplus by fiscal year 2026-2027, all while ensuring fairness in our tax system and promoting economic growth to increase Bermuda's tax base. To achieve this, we must continue to make the difficult and sometimes unpopular decisions required to demonstrate to external stakeholders that the government of Bermuda can be trusted to exercise fiscal prudence. I am pleased to report that the Auditor General has issued a clean audit opinion for the last fiscal year. A key highlight for this fiscal year was that the budget deficit narrowed significantly, with the actual budget recorded at $66 million. Madam President, total revenue for fiscal year 2021-2022 was $1.086 billion, which was $86.8 million or 6% higher than estimates and $87.4 million higher than the previous year's revenue of $998.3 million. Total current account expenditure on a modified cash basis was $1.076 billion, which was $9.1 million less than adjusted estimates. Total capital account modified cash expenditure was $75.9 million, which was $16.9 million lower than the original budget estimates. Total capital and current account modified cash expenditure for 21-22 was $1.152 billion, which was $28 million or 2.5% higher than the original budget estimate of $1.124 billion. As a reminder, the deficit for fiscal year 2020-2021 during the peak of the global pandemic was $184.2 million. The following year ended with a deficit of $66 million, despite the continued payments to Skyport and costs incurred due to the Morgan's Point project. The improvement is reflective of government's policies pursuing economic growth and commitment to effectively managing the public purse. However, as I will address later, this excellent budget performance marks significant underfunding of the hospital, which the government has remedied in this current fiscal year and will address further in the next fiscal year.
Right, okay. Senator Hudson, I just would like to remind you that you have 10 minutes left of your hour presentation.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll actually go on to the highlights of our current expenditure.
Mhm.
Current account expenditure for fiscal year 2023-2024 is estimated at $972.6 million. This figure represents an increase of 2.9% over last year's original estimate. This increase is in line with the figure projected by the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, which stated that a more realistic level of spending for this year's budget would be $973.4 million. The Cabinet is aware that the current expenditure level this year will carry to next year, and that any new programs will need to be offset by revisions to existing ones, which in essence makes this a two-year budget. Current expenditure is projected to increase by 1% over the next 2 fiscal years, which has been inserted solely to take into account possible negotiated salary increases for public officers. All ministries except for Home Affairs received a boost to funding levels this year. The level of current account spending set this year is a realistic baseline for future budgets, as it adequately funds government services that have not properly been funded in previous years, including public works, national security, public transportation, economic development, healthcare and hospital funding, youth services, the judiciary, or services for seniors. This level of spending is necessary to advance key government initiatives such as healthcare reform, education reform, continued implementation of Bermuda's Economic Recovery Plan, and the implementation of Bermuda's privacy protection legislation. This budget increases the child daycare allowances for parents, transitional living for young persons aging out of care, and care homes. It also funds the reintroduction of public health scholarships and air quality monitoring for those affected by BALCO emissions, while expanding social protections for families via financial assistance. Bermuda's infrastructure has been challenged due to years of underinvestment. This inability to maintain basic infrastructure is not in keeping within an island that has become an important international financial center and aspires to have an even greater impact in the future. We recognize that we cannot keep starving our island of needed investments in infrastructure in the name of achieving a balanced budget. Therefore, this budget contains $96 million in planned capital account expenditure, the highest budgeted capital spending in 13 years. The most significant items of capital development expenditure in the 2023-2024 budget relate to further investment in the Tynes Bay Waste-to-Energy facility, additional affordable housing units, 40 additional electric buses, and infrastructure to support their recharging, refits to our fast ferries, and investment to accommodate students at Bermuda's new parish primary schools at Francis Perrotton and Purvis Primary. Additional funds have also been allocated to develop a new community health clinic in Somerset, purchase new public works equipment to reduce maintenance costs while providing key services like clearing seaweed from beaches, upgrading facilities that house public offices at the government quarry, DPT depot and Marine Ports workshed, and replace aging vehicles and equipment for the Bermuda Police Service, Fire Service, and the Department of Corrections. Finally, this capital budget funds upgrades to Bermuda's court facilities, additional investments in the government's IT systems, and an increase in funding to repave the roads in Bermuda. In October of last year, we announced its support for the $21.6 million grant to the Bermuda Housing Corporation to refurbish 137 older housing units, inclusive of 77 additional units, which represent the entire vacant and derelict inventory owned by the corporation. This project will again not only create jobs and stimulate economic activity, but also ultimately increase the stock of affordable housing as promised in both our 2017 and 2020 general election platforms. Madam President, the following items are the revenue changes that form a part of the revenue estimate for fiscal year 2023-2024. The payroll tax changes in this budget come as a result of meaningful consultation that has taken place following the release of the pre-budget report. With our commitment to a transparent budgeting process, the government shared its considerations and the challenges faced when putting together an annual budget that maintained our path to a balanced budget in fiscal year 2024-2025, including the loss of a combined $40 million in revenue from the aircraft registry due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the lost funding as a result of ending the travel authorization. This is a budget for growth, and what is necessary for growth is that you support the businesses that can provide growth in the economy. That means not just international business, but also local businesses, both large and small, our tourism establishments, and our retail outlets. The headline is that no business in Bermuda will pay any more in employer payroll taxes in this budget than last year. All employer rates will either stay the same or they will go down. Small businesses, the lifeblood of most economies, will see their payroll tax liability decline by as much as 43%. And we will deliver payroll tax reductions to retailers, gyms, convenience stores, construction companies, and truckers. Our hotels and restaurants, which are still recovering from the impact of the pandemic, will see their payroll tax liability decline by 17%. Any individual making $132,000 or less per year will pay less in payroll taxes next year. This represents 86% of Bermuda's workforce, 86% of the workers in the economy who give their time and talents to produce for their employers will pay less in payroll tax next year. Businesses with an annual payroll of up to $200,000, their employer payroll tax rate will move the employer payroll tax rate from 3.5% to 2.5%, 29% reduction. Actually, let me move forward. Sorry, Madam President. While Bermuda's system for employee payroll tax is regrettably complex, one of the hallmarks of a good system of taxation is that it is simple to understand. Unfortunately, the current structure of our employee payroll tax is anything but simple. Although the government desires to simplify this tax system in the future, while we are in the midst of a review of our tax policies due to the required implementation of the OECD Global Minimum Tax, that necessary simplification will not be delivered this year. Before this government was reelected in 2017, workers making $48,000 a year were paying $2,280 a year in payroll taxes. And since then, this government has steadily reduced the tax burden on Bermuda's workers, and we have continued to do so in this budget. Next year, the same worker will pay only $240 in payroll tax, a reduction of $2,040. This means that since the government was elected, workers earning $48,000 have paid nearly $7,000 less in payroll tax, meaning $7,000 more in their pockets to spend on things that they and their families actually need.
Mhm.
There are other changes in terms of customs duty. We have made adjustments to fees, to support the government's necessary infrastructure investment. And many of these fees are expected to actually generate an additional $500,000 in revenue for the government. I am proud to share that we are still on the path to achieving the goal of a balanced budget by 2024-2025. And while it is true that we could have achieved a balanced budget on paper this year, to do so would not have been economically wise. The Ministry of Finance could have held to last year's current expenditure target rather than increasing current expenditure to ensure that we deliver on key initiatives in the government's platform and Bermuda's economic recovery plan to improve the lives of Bermuda's residents. We could have chosen not to reduce taxes on persons making less than $132,000 a year and chosen not to reduce taxes on local businesses while working families and local businesses struggle with the highest global inflation seen in years.
Senator Hudson, you have less than 1 minute left, so you need to
Thank you, Madam President.
finalize your.
In closing, I will say that I am proud to commend to this chamber a budget that will stay true to the mantra of hope set out in the early days of Dame Lois Brown Evans, Eugene Cox, and David Allen, of my grandfather, Arthur Hudson, and Nelson Bascom, and Walton Brown, and so many others who dedicated their lives to service and the pursuit of that fairer and better Bermuda that we continue to build. I submit this budget with the greatest of conviction that we are on a good path towards continued economic growth and the better, fairer Bermuda that we all wish to see. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Ariana Hudson, Junior Minister of Finance. Would any senator care to speak on this? Senator DeCuto, you have the floor. And you have an hour.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Hodgson. Madam President, Senate colleagues, listeners, good morning.
Morning.
I am pleased to be here with you today to discuss Bermuda's current economic situation and the government's proposed budget. We will scrutinize the facts and figures, we will look at supporting data, and we will ask questions. But ultimately, Madam President, while we will talk about numbers, what we are really talking about is how is this government taking care of the people of Bermuda? How have they done so far, and how do we think they will do? What are this government's priorities, and are they the right priorities? Unfortunately, the picture of Bermuda's economy is not pretty. The experience of Bermudians is not a good one, and the track record and outlook of the PLP government's performance does not leave much to hope for. Madam President, we will discuss that while the PLP government speaks often of confidence, this confidence is not supported by the facts and what the people are feeling on the ground. And while there have been a few external factors driving this, the main factors have been the government's mismanagement of the country's finances and the numerous failures of their misguided initiatives. In short, Madam President, when people are asked, are you better off today than 5 years ago? The answer is a resounding no. The One Bermuda Alliance would improve our island's economy by a responsible growth and a solutions-focused approach to create jobs and opportunity for Bermuda and her people. We have a demonstrated track record of this and look forward to turning our country's economy and, more importantly, our people's lived experiences back into a positive direction. Madam President, let's turn now to a survey of the general economic situation. I'd like to start by expressing my thanks to our civil servants who compile, calculate, and produce a wide variety of data and reports that we can use to better understand our country. And that includes the budget books, which I have mine here in front of me. And so I'd like to thank them for their hard work and attention to detail, which is much appreciated and certainly not taken for granted. Madam President, we'll start with the GDP, or gross domestic product statistics, one measure of economic output. And just for clarity, I'm using here amounts adjusted for inflation, or sometimes known as real dollars. From 2017 through 2021, Bermuda's GDP has decreased by minus 1.8%. Although there was a strong uptick of 5.8% in 2021, it was not enough to make up for the reduction caused by COVID and the lackluster growth in 2018 and 2019 of minus 0.2% and 0.5% respectively. And unfortunately, because to me and many other informed observers, our official inflation figures seem a bit low, I am of the opinion that last year's GDP growth was in fact even lower on a real basis. By comparison, other jurisdictions have seen more positive growth both before COVID, less downturn during COVID, and even more growth since COVID. For example, from 2017 to 2021, the OECD in general saw a 2.2% increase. The Euro area was slightly down at minus 0.4%, and the USA, our major trading partner, saw 4.7%. Compare that to our minus 1.8% over the same period. As you can see, Madam President, while the world economy has moved on from COVID, we have yet to get up to speed here in Bermuda. And unfortunately, for the average Bermudian or Bermudian business, the impact of that slow economy is even worse. As we learned from the Premier's budget statement, international business is an important linchpin of our economy. And the economic growth that we have managed to see in our statistics is driven primarily by that by that international business. Madam President, IB in 2021 provided 29% of our GDP, up from 26% in 2017. Real estate, 17%. Financial and insurance activities, 14%, and all those combined, 40% of our GDP. From 2017 to 2021, international business GDP was plus 11.4%. Real estate was plus 7.9%. Financial and insurance was down minus 8.6%. And everything else was also down minus 10.7%. For example, wholesale and retail down minus 9.8%. Accommodation and food service down minus 50%. Professional, scientific, and technical activities are down minus 6.4%. Madam President, I will spare you and the listeners the rest of that table. But as you can see, outside of international business, the Bermudian working in or running a local business is hurting economically. Madam President, let's turn to retail sales, another key indicator we can use to illustrate this tough economic situation. For example, the November retail sales index was down minus 10.3% since 2017. And in fact, the only annual increase was the post-COVID rebound of 9.5% in 2020 in that time period. All other years were negative. This is no surprise for anyone walking through the city of Hamilton these days who can see the closed storefronts. I have the greatest respect for our local businesses who are applying all of their creativity, ingenuity, and elbow grease to stay up and running and grow however they can in this tough environment. Meanwhile, in comparison, in the United States, retail sales have grown 15% since 2017. That's inclusive of the impact of COVID. Madam President, unfortunately, we see another grim statistic in our jobs numbers. From 2018 to 2022, total jobs in Bermuda are down minus 6.3%, from 33,855 to 31,718, a loss of 2,137 jobs. But as with GDP, the impact on the average Bermudian is worse. International business, which makes up 15% of the jobs and is the largest category of employment, grew the number of jobs by 14.6%. Wholesale and retail lost minus 7.5%, or 320 jobs. Accommodation and food service lost minus 28.1%, or 1,277 jobs. Human health and social work lost minus 11.6%, or 325 jobs. Meanwhile, from comparison to our minus 6.3% in total jobs, from 2017 to 2021, the Euro area grew plus 0.5%. The OECD grew plus 1.8%, and the USA grew in jobs 0.6%. Madam President, these jobs numbers are yet another indicator where our economy has not kept up with the rest of the world, with an unfortunately direct negative impact on thousands of people in Bermuda. Madam President, let me round out these statistics with inflation. Our current official rate in Bermuda is a touch under 4%, of which food is plus 10%, which everybody feels in the grocery store each week. And we know that inflation in the US is still over 6%. So despite the official statistics, most people in Bermuda are feeling a historically high cost of living. Bermudians are being squeezed from both sides by high cost and a slow economy, a double threat. Madam President, all of those statistics make the case that while Premier David Burt and the PLP government profess hope and confidence, those words ring hollow for most in Bermuda. But it's not just what the statistics are telling us. It's what my colleagues and I are being told on the doorstep. And Madam President, for the avoidance of doubt, I and my colleagues do want everyone's vote. And we are out there talking to and listening to people and earning that vote. And we have yet to hear anyone with hope or confidence in this government's ability to turn around the economy. Madam President, this PLP government claims that it has created many initiatives to help the people of Bermuda. And I will grant that it is true that they have been able to provide a helping hand to some of our fellow Bermudians, for example, by shifting the tax burden to higher earners. We have no argument with that per se and support progressive taxation. And because so many in Bermuda are hurting right now, it's the right thing to do. However, Madam President, the even better thing to do would be to grow the economy and create real opportunity and jobs for people. Instead of reacting to the symptoms, this government should also be attacking the disease, our faltering economy. The PLP government is playing a zero-sum game with the economy by increasing taxes and shifting money around. Or putting another way, Finance Minister Premier Burt is simply finding ways to slice the economic pie thinner and thinner. The One Bermuda Alliance, Madam President, would grow that economic pie so that fewer people would need assistance and to create a more vibrant and dynamic economy. Madam President, Premier Burt claims that 80% of the Economic Recovery Plan initiatives are on track. However, our own evaluation leads to a somewhat different conclusion. Here's our view on the top 4 initiatives as listed by the Minister of Economic Development earlier this year. Vertical farming. As you know, earlier this year, based on our research and speaking with local farmers, we predicted that vertical farming, as proposed by the government, did not make sense for Bermuda due to the excessively high energy costs it would require and the fact that existing capacity in Bermuda was not fully used. We suggested that instead the government should pursue right tech solutions in conjunction with local farmers. Sure enough, this initiative was canceled when the overseas partner pulled out due to financial issues. We were disappointed that the government either would not or could not answer our questions about this project, which we feel were particularly important since the project failed and would provide insight on how to improve similar projects going forward. However, we were glad to see that the government will follow our suggestion by hiring an agronomist to work with local farmers. Madam President, the Times Bay Incinerator Refurbishment Project. While we support the capital expenditure required to update this vital piece of national infrastructure, it is our view that this does not do much for local economic stimulus compared to the amount of money involved in the total project. We learned that the $22 million budgeted for this project, of that 70% will be spent overseas. Of the remaining 30%, over half of that will be spent on existing works and engineering staff, leaving only 12.5% or $2.75 million to be spent locally. In addition, this project only came about due to the government's lack of attention to the incinerator and its failure to properly maintain it. If anything, this project is really deferred capital spending, not stimulus. Madam President, let's turn to gaming. We now know that there is little to nil chance of gaming happening at all on the island due to at least one of our main hotel operators pulling out of its initiatives and others unlikely to continue for now. And as was predicted, when the PLP government changed the accountability of the Gaming Commission, the main problem remains the direct political control of the commission, which prevents operators from getting the appropriate banking support. The Premier and the PLP government are doubling down on their bet here by putting the commission under control of the Minister of Finance, who is also currently the Premier. This, Madam President, is a losing bet for all of us. Instead, the Premier should know when to walk away from the table and let the Gaming Commission become independent again, as it was originally constituted. To add insult to injury, the government is guaranteeing $9.8 million of loans to the Gaming Commission. Since there is no gaming industry on the island, and there is unlikely to be one at this rate, the Commission will never have the income to repay these loans, and government is certain to have to step in. That's a $9.8 million bad bet. Madam President, turning to Northeast Hamilton, this initiative is the most sensible and the one we can clearly support. We hope for its great success, along with the intention to allow further residential development throughout all of Hamilton. We believe this increased development for housing will be essential to go along with increasing our population. However, success here requires investors to be enticed by an improved economy, and without any realistic initiative from the government to grow our population, this does not seem likely to take off. Madam President, the government also introduced several new initiatives in their budget statement and reiterated others from prior throne speeches or prior years. It's hard to know what to say about many of these, as a few of them seem to have sprung from nowhere with little to no information, and they raise more questions than answers. Madam President, I suppose we could see a possible path to success with medical tourism, but it seems complicated and risky. I note that our current hospital is often at capacity. We struggle to get the right medical expertise on the island, and our healthcare is very expensive. How can we expect to provide expertise, resources, and facilities to people from overseas at an attractive price and with convenience? It seems to me that we would be in competition with other jurisdictions where it is far cheaper to operate or where it is much easier to access medical expertise. So at first blush, medical tourism does not seem practical to me. And importantly, as always, when evaluating these types of initiatives, we need to know who are the advisors and who are the stakeholders. That may tell us more about the likely success of this initiative than anything else. As we know, a major theme behind many of the government's failures has been its poor choice of partners. Many of them have been businesses that were poorly conceived themselves, or outright scam artists or criminals. Arbitrade, Savvy, Calera. Madam President, I hope you enjoyed the lovely picture of the proposed Morgan's Point development in the budget statement. I am personally of the view that this may be as much detail as we will ever see about this project, based on this government's track record of transparency and accountability, or as I would say, lack thereof. If I understand correctly, the government and Finance Minister Premier Burt, which have been staunchly against government guarantees, are now proposing another new large guarantee. This is the definition of a flip-flop. The Morgan's Point property was always a bit of a poison chalice due to its long history of use by the U.S. Navy and the pollution that engendered. Once the PLP government swapped Morgan's Point for Southlands, the government, whoever that may be, was always going to be on the hook for that liability. Madam President, we agree that it is of the utmost importance to do something constructive with the Morgan's Point property. However, we struggle with this proposal in two ways. First, the Premier was absolutely clear that this would not be a hotel. I would suggest, however, that if we want to stimulate a third leg of our economy and provide a range of jobs for Bermudians, wouldn't a hotel, in fact, be what we would like to see here? Secondly, Madam President, this development seems as if it would be in direct competition with exactly the same investors and potential customers as we would like to see in Northeast Hamilton, Somerset, St. George's, and Hamilton in general. This development, with guarantees and no doubt concessions, would steal customers from the private developers that we would like to see in those other areas. Finally, where are the people for this development? Once again, we believe that the success of projects like this will be connected to the real immigration reform that will let us grow our population by the 8,000 to 10,000 people that is required. Madam President, let's discuss digital assets and fintech. As we know, the Premier is frequently on the road, he is on the road and on the record, touting fintech and digital assets as the solution to our woes. While there is a place for fintech and digital assets in our economy, we must tread very carefully and always be mindful of what Bermuda's strengths are and how they match up with potential businesses that look to come to our island. Our strengths as a jurisdiction are tax efficiency, a quality regulator, and the associated good reputation, and our natural charms and convenient location. We can always debate later in which order to place those strengths, but I would put to you that our regulator and good reputation are paramount and essential to the long-term health of our economy. Madam President, we must be very discerning about which businesses and operators we allow into Bermuda. While we support fintech and digital asset businesses as a concept, we would make sure that the Bermuda Monetary Authority exercised the highest diligence possible and that we fully understood why each business wanted to come to Bermuda. We would stay away from fancy promises and flashy MOUs and ensure each business made sense as a business and was run by reputable stakeholders. This selectiveness is vital because right now the fintech and digital asset industry is filled with a wide variety of, frankly, confusing technical activity, from legitimate businesses to shady characters and straight up criminal activity like Ponzi schemes. And there are many unsavory operators out there taking advantage of the hype. Madam President, frankly, we are lucky to have avoided a debacle like the FTX scandal that has impacted the Bahamas and, in fact, the entire world of crypto and fintech. But we have had our own disappointments. Every time I'm in the City Hall parking lot or by the bus terminal and I see Victoria Hall, I am reminded of Arbitrade. If you recall, Arbitrade was very publicly and effusively welcomed to Bermuda by the Premier in 2018, only to end up accused of fraud by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and the Toronto financial regulator in late 2022. And unfortunately, Arbitrade's fall from grace was no surprise to informed individuals who had been paying attention to things like their claims of gold bullion and the like. Madam President, I have no doubt you heard of the failure this past weekend of the Silicon Valley Bank that has been taken over by the U.S. regulators. And at the same time, the regulators have also taken over a bank called Signature Bank in New York. Now, this situation is still unfolding in real time, but I think it is safe to say that Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank may not have had the most prudent risk management. As we know, in February 2019, the government touted Signature Bank as Bermuda's fintech banking solution via a press release. I would presume this is no longer the case, and I wonder exactly how this will affect the government's specific plans for this industry and how carefully government vetted this partner. Madam President, I provide these examples not to say that we should avoid fintech and digital assets, but to demonstrate how easy it can be to set a foot wrong if we do not properly pay attention. The One Bermuda Alliance would pay attention. Madam President, we can all support a vision of a more efficient, customer-friendly, and modern banking industry here in Bermuda. However, the government's reform items don't add much to what we have today or raise some serious red flags. Let us take the narrow purpose banks, for which there was already legislation to provide such licenses, but ultimately no banks using them. The problem remains of getting correspondent banks for the relevant industries, such as cannabis and gaming, both of which initiatives are dead in the water in Bermuda. For credit unions, we would welcome anything to support and strengthen the island's existing credit union, and I'm not sure more competition will do that. For specialized banks, I repeat my concerns around fintech. We would need very carefully to consider and understand why they want to come to Bermuda and what value they would bring to our domestic market, if any. Madam President, as for the Bermuda Digital Bank, referred to as government's flagship initiative, we should be very concerned. I can do no better than quote the Fiscal Responsibility Panel here from their 2021 report. And I quote, "The Bermuda Digital Bank must be fully independent of government and subject to all the normal regulatory and supervisory requirements and procedures of the Bermuda Monetary Authority." Also, I quote, "Any initial government startup capital should be strictly limited, and there should be clear legislative and/or contractual provisions making clear that there is no scope for additional government finance provided directly or indirectly, and that the Bermuda Digital Bank does not benefit from any government guarantee, direct or implicit." End quote. Madam President, the government's role here is to create the regulation and circumstances that would allow a new banking entrant or an existing bank to create a digital bank, if that made business sense. We, of course, in the OBA support creating a Madam President, the OBA, of course, supports creating a nation of owners, one of the stated goals of this initiative. But in our view, the best way to do that is to create a good economy so that people have money to invest, rather than sprinkling digital pixie dust on everything. Madam President, the last initiative I wish to discuss is the Fairmont Southampton. Let's be crystal clear. We want this project to succeed. We need this project to succeed. We are hoping desperately for this project to succeed. But to be honest, it is hard to know exactly what is happening. It seems every time the government makes an announcement or expresses confidence, nothing happens, or the project is changing, and so forth. And as of today, I frankly can't believe another promised start date from this government until I see workers in hard hats up there. Madam President, in September of 2020, the hotel closing was announced and reopening was promised in April 2022. That's almost a year ago. In March 2022, we heard the Premier say, "I am confident this transaction will close next month and construction will commence." A grand reopening was promised for 2023. Madam President, I refer back to my comment about workers in hard hats. In October last year, the Premier told delegates at the Progressive Labor Party annual conference that, quote, "The deal has been done, the deal has been signed." That's a pretty definitive statement, Madam President. In December last year, however, in the other place, the Premier was then unable to confirm when the deal would be finalized. Madam President, I am sorry for all those details, but I thought it would be good to illustrate why precisely we can't be particularly confident in any promises from this government and Premier about this hotel. Madam President, we are in agreement with the former Finance Minister Curtis Dickinson when he stated that the Premier's deal for GenCom on the hotel was a, quote, dangerous gamble. However, the dice have now been thrown, and we can only hope that they come up with a good result. My last comment on the Fairmont Southampton project is to highlight the reckless way in which the government has provided a freebie to GenCom with the condos. Regardless of whatever promises have been or may be made, GenCom is going to build hundreds of condos and sell them for hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. They are going to get whatever SDOs they want, and they are going to build them tax-free, and the people who buy them are going to have them free from land tax for 10 years. And there is no guarantee they will even be used for hotel rooms. And what will the government get from all of this? No tax revenue, that's for sure. Meanwhile, Madam President, your local developer, our homeowner who wants to do a little project, maybe add on an apartment for Airbnb, they are going to be paying more taxes. They are going to have to jump through all the hoops. Meanwhile, GenCom will be profiting from building on our protected lands and walking away with hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Madam President, that's not right. So that took a little while, but I think I have given a relatively thorough overview of many of the government's initiatives and highlighted exactly why, unfortunately, we should not have confidence in the government's ability to successfully grow Bermuda's economy. Madam President, let's turn now to some of the budget facts and figures and what that means for our country. The most pressing concern is our staggering, humongous, oppressive national debt that is hanging over our heads and the heads of our children. This was a debt that was incurred almost wholly due to the actions of successive Progressive Labor Party governments. In 1998, our debt was $150 million, and there was a $15 million budget surplus. 5 years later, in 2003, deficit spending had begun, and by 2007, the deficit was $136 million. From 2008 to 2012, annual deficits were well over $200 million per year, and in 2012, the deficit was $226 million, with a net debt of almost $1.5 billion. From 2012 to 2017, the OBA government was able to rein in the deficit spending, reducing it to only $70 million, which sounds like a large number. But remember, it's less than a third of where it was when the OBA government started. And did you know that when the OBA first became government, they had to take a loan just to make the payroll for the government workers? Madam President, today that debt is projected by the government to be $3.14 billion. On a humorous note, I will note that yesterday was March 14th, also known as Pi Day, after the special number pi, which is 3.14. Anyway, $3.14 billion, that is $50,251 per person in Bermuda. What does that number mean? The median income for Bermudians in November 2020 was $61,000, not much higher. That means if everybody worked for a year at the median income, took all that money, we would just about pay the debt and some left over. Madam President, the amount it costs us to pay for that debt is $130 million a year, just in interest costs, and almost all of it leaves the country. Putting it another way, that's $130 million extracted from Bermuda residents as taxes that serves no productive use in our economy. That's an average of $4,099 in taxes paid per working resident per year that just leaves the country to go overseas to pay interest. And while we are stuck paying that debt interest, that money is not available to pave roads, support healthcare, improve education, or provide any other critical services or resources to the people of Bermuda. Also troubling, Madam President, the population to support these taxes and to support the debt is decreasing. From 2012, from 2017 to 2021, that's increased from 422 per year to 727 per year. Perhaps that was COVID, but at the same time, births decreased from 648 per year to only 494. So while we have not had a census in a while, one thing is clear: the population is not growing, and the cost to support our debt per person will only increase. In general, the government's approach to this problem has been to increase various taxes. And while many people will see some decrease in payroll taxes, and some businesses too, which we support, government fees will be rising in many areas, and that will be felt in people's pockets. And Madam President, I have not even mentioned the unfunded pension liabilities, an effective debt for this government. It is projected that the public sector pension fund will run out of money in 2044. I would suggest that all civil servants carefully watch this space. It is an area where government's financial mismanagement will hit them hard and very personally. Madam President, turning to international business, one thing that the government and the opposition agree on is the vital importance of international business to our economy. And we've discussed how IB drives a large chunk of the economy in jobs, services, and other ways, including a big chunk of government's tax income. And if my calculations are right, I think it's about 23 or 24% of the government's total revenue comes straight from international business payroll tax. We also know through consultation with IB and through numerous statements from executives that the increased payroll taxes are going to be a drag on IB's appetite and ability to hire and pay for talent in Bermuda. In the new world of remote work and global interconnectedness, every job that IB might hire in Bermuda will be subject to intense scrutiny versus many other cheaper jurisdictions. Therefore, Madam President, we ask that the government be careful in how it approaches this pillar of the economy so that it continues to work for Bermuda for a very long time. Madam President, speaking of international business, there are some who view the potentially forthcoming global minimum tax as a potential windfall for Bermuda that will solve our country's revenue problems. However, should this tax come into play, it would be a true poison chalice. While it's too soon to know where this will truly end up, there are three main points to keep in mind. Should this global tax become a reality, we would lose one of our critical competitive advantages, tax efficiency. We should not realistically expect all the businesses that are here today to remain. Also, please note that in some years, insurance companies don't make money, and therefore they wouldn't pay any tax on profits. Adding to this, the losses in one year can sometimes carry across multiple years, meaning that we as a country could not reliably budget or count on this income. And finally, it's unclear that all countries will sign on to or implement this global minimum tax, including the United States. So while we must watch this space closely and engage carefully, by no means should we expect this global minimum tax to be a solution to our problems. Madam President, in addition to the sheer amount of debt that we have, the other concerning thing is that this budget makes no concession to reducing the deficit. The Premier claims that we are on a glide path to a budget surplus, but we doubt this glide path has a smooth landing. As I laid out earlier, the government has provided no credible initiatives for serious economic growth. There's no plan being shown for growing the population, and yet this government continues with a deficit budget. Madam President, we can accept the hard math that part of reducing our crushing national debt will require raising revenues as taxes. But we must also accept that we have to adjust the other side of the equation and reduce spending so that it is more focused and effective. This would not be surprising for any family that has had to struggle with debt. They would recognize that not only may family members have to find more work and hustle for more income, the family also has to tighten its belt, hold on to that car for a few more years, stop eating out, cancel the vacations, really focus on the most important things. It's not enjoyable, but it is common sense. However, this PLP government seems to be ignoring that side of the equation. Under the PLP government since 2017, government spending has risen every single year since 2012, except for one. Sorry, 2017, except for one. And 2023 spending will be 119 million more than in 2017, or 13%. Madam President, about half of this government spending is for employees and consultants. From 2006 to 2012, this category of spending grew 18% under the Progressive Labor Party. From 2012 to 2017, the One Bermuda Alliance managed to reduce these expenses by minus 11%, without, I may add, laying off any workers. From 2012 to 2023, however, those expenses have increased again by 13% under the Progressive Labor Party, from $491.5 million to $556.6 million. Since 2017, the government has seen an increase in both workers and consultants. From 2012 to 2017, under the One Bermuda Alliance, the number of consultants decreased by minus 57%, from 96 to 41. But since 2017, under the PLP, the number has increased again to 64, or plus 56%. Madam President, I know the Premier was quite adamant that he has decreased the number of people employed by the government. However, I must admit that I don't have access to same numbers as he does, because the budget book tells a different story, as I just laid out. In fact, according to budget books, the actual number of employees in 2017 was 4,764, while the number budgeted for 2023 is 5,055. I suppose the government will claim that's because the budget headcounts may not be filled. Madam President, how can the government claim to take credit for reducing staff when it is planning to hire even more? And if it isn't actually hiring the number of staff in the budget book, where exactly is that money going?
Senator Decutu, while you take your something, your drink of water, I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable N.H. Cole Simons, JPMP, Opposition Leader, and Shadow Minister of Finance, who's in the gallery. Welcome to you, sir. Do continue, Senator Decutu.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, we have spoken about the impact of the staff and consultants on the budget. But I would like to ask why, when we have a premier who promotes fintech and touts innovation at conferences, why I have to go to Works in Engineering and pay a bill in person or mail a check. I don't even have a checkbook anymore, Madam President. Why does every single government department have a different way to pay? Why do land tax bills not come by email? Madam President, I think you get my point. And certainly every resident of this island who has had to deal with government at the retail level knows what I'm trying to say. There is a massive opportunity for government to make it easier for people on this island to pay their bills, get their information, and interact with the government services. And this would make government more efficient and cost effective. I don't blame the civil service. We know that many departments have made their own individual initiatives to create innovative services. But where is the direction from the top down and the resources so that government services can operate like it's 2023? We've heard about PATI fees proposed by the government, and we've heard about the alleged $300,000 cost to field a query. But those costs aren't issues with PATI. They're issues with how government works and are further indicators of the needs to modernize and improve government processes. Madam President, as another example of government inefficiency, take this heavy budget book sitting in front of me now. As you know, we have specifically requested the information contained in this book to be provided in a modern digital format like a spreadsheet. But the Premier has explicitly directed for us not to be provided that information. I can't fathom it. The government has the information in a spreadsheet. The civil servants writing the briefs have the information. They provided it after all, but we are denied that information. Madam President, this is an incredibly ridiculous way of operating in 2023. If someone in a modern office job was to receive information this way, they wouldn't even bother to look at it. In my view, the Premier should be embarrassed, and I have to wonder, what is he worried about that is contained in this budget book that is the people's business? But don't worry, Madam President, I have acquired a good pencil sharpener, an automatic one I might add. I have changed the batteries in my calculator, and I have applied orange tabs to all the relevant sections of the book. We will find out what is going on in this budget. Madam President, as another example, I noted that the interfund guarantee seems to have gone away, and I understand there's a court case with government. It is hard to understand how innovators are going to be attracted to work with this government when it allegedly can't seem to honor its agreements with them. My final example of efficiency and value is the government's takeover of the municipalities. Take the city of Hamilton. By all accounts, the city works well. The roads are paved, the street lights work, the trash gets picked up, and so forth. Now the government is going to cut the revenue the city of Hamilton receives from parking tickets due to administrative costs. That's fair enough on the face of it. But then we learn that the corporation has in fact been trying to work with the government since 2017 to streamline the process and find alternative, more efficient ways for the fines to be collected, including offering to pay to help collect the fines. However, government has ignored them. This is yet another example where there are obvious ways to become more efficient, but the government, for some inexplicable reason, refused to make improvements. Madam President, what possible value does it bring to the people of Bermuda for the government to take over the municipalities? How will that grow the economy, improve education, or make healthcare better? It won't, and it's a waste of the taxpayers' money. If anything, the government should learn some lessons in administration from the city and get to work boosting the economy and tourism for the benefit of Somerset and St. George's. Madam President, we remain very concerned about the financial situation of the hospital. The government provides a guarantee of $785 million to Paget Health Services. This is the largest government guarantee by a factor of 12. This guarantee is used to support the debt financing of and regular payments to the public-private partnership put in place by the PLP government in 2010 to build the hospital. The government currently pays Paget Healthcare Services fees for this debt and for maintenance, and will be doing so until 2044, 21 more years. In 2022, this annual fee was $28.3 million. And unlike the airport, this fee doesn't go away if the hospital has more revenue or sees more patients. Madam President, in 2018, the government changed the hospital funding model to a flat grant of $322 million per year. However, in the Premier's words, he is saddened that the government has never fully honored that commitment. Madam President, we should all be sad that this government does not have enough money to pay the hospital what it needs. In fact, the hospital has been operating on an overdraft. It boggles my mind that this vital grant was not paid in full each year, and I really can't understand it. I also can't understand why the hospital, one of government's biggest budget items, has not even provided audited accounts since 2018. These are further concrete examples of how the government's financial mismanagement negatively impacts the vital services that Bermuda and its people rely upon daily. Madam President, I think I have provided a relatively comprehensive overview of the many issues with this government's budget and its leadership and management of our country's finances. There's more to say, but I am conscious of time. And it is fair to ask, what would the OBA do? First of all, Madam President, the One Bermuda Alliance is committed to our vision of a prosperous future for all Bermudians with ample economic opportunities, accessible health care, world-class education, and a safe and strong community in a healthy environment. And we remain guided by our values of inclusion. We work for and welcome all Bermudians. I think that's a particularly important point given the statements by government ministers last week. Integrity. We prize the public's trust by being fair and transparent in all dealings and leading by example. I would contrast that to the examples of government obfuscation I spoke about earlier. Financial responsibility for social benefit. We would prudently manage the public's funds to address social issues and create opportunity. Madam President, we would focus on high-impact initiatives with quality partners that are likely to succeed to help turn this country around. We would not be distracted by vanity projects and power plays, such as pursuing independence and fighting with the municipalities. We would avoid meddling in and competing with the private sector by trying to pick winners. Instead, we would create fair and transparent conditions to attract private investment in areas that are most likely to grow our economy in a meaningful way. Tourism, international business, and fintech, where it makes sense and the operators are high quality. Madam President, we would tackle the country's debt by focusing government expenditures on the most important areas for our people and carefully controlling our costs and the size of the government to provide impactful and efficient services to the country. Madam President, we would follow through on the vital problem of growing Bermuda's population. As the government said in October, and I quote, "It is predicted that Bermuda's current working population will be unable to support the local economy in years to come," end quote. We would work to grow the working population by the 8,400 people suggested by the government, or some people suggest 10,000, by making Bermuda an attractive place for Bermudians to return to and welcome overseas talent where it is in the economic interest of Bermuda and Bermudians. In its short time as government, the One Bermuda Alliance assembled a track record of several successful projects. Not everything was perfect, but in balance, investment was increased, the economy was improved, and government spending was brought under control. But ultimately, Madam President, it's not really about the money or the jobs. Those are just the tools that we will use to make Bermuda a place where we can all live with dignity, safety, and in a strong community. That's our goal, Madam President. To conclude, I am reminded of two quotes that I believe apply to this government's budget. The first quote is from Ernest Hemingway's book, The Sun Also Rises. And in the answer to one character's question of how did you go bankrupt, the answer, Madam Speaker, is two ways: gradually and then suddenly. When the consequences arrive for the PLP government's inaction, they will arrive very suddenly, and it will be too late for us. Madam President, the other quote I had in mind is one that I was not able to properly attribute, but which will be familiar. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. This government's budget is the latest example of its inability to face reality, learn from mistakes, and do better for Bermuda. The government and its leadership has shown it is unable to change how it operates. In my opinion, Madam President, and that of a rapidly increasing fraction of the population, the only way for us to get a different result is to change the government. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator DeCuto. Senators, it's now 20 past. Does anyone have a short presentation of 10 minutes? Because I would allow the person. Senator White, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I read this year's budget in detail and intend to offer my balanced views on it. Perhaps not as rosy as Senator Hodgson's, but perhaps not as dire as Senator DeCuto's. Ministers of finance over many years in Bermuda have been challenged to present a budget that provides the many stakeholders and interested parties in Bermuda's forecasted cash flows a sense of optimism. The upcoming 2023-2024 year is no exception. And this situation is not unique to Bermuda. Governments globally are faced with similar issues. We have had a succession of finance ministers who have forecasted a balanced government budget in the following 3 years. We have yet to achieve this milestone, and I am very hopeful that the finance minister's forecast of a balanced budget for Bermuda will be realized in 2024, 2025, as he has declared. It is so very important the large government debt of approximately $7 billion, including unfunded pension and health liabilities, begins to start to be paid down. Bermuda so desperately needs the $130 million of annual interest on our debt to be prioritized and reduced so that these funds can be allocated to health insurance for the uninsured and underinsured, strengthening our public education system so that our youth can achieve their career goals, and elder care for our increasingly aging population. Madam President, in analyzing Bermuda's current financial situation, I viewed two separate but related buckets of taxpayers. The first is international business, i.e. those businesses domiciled and operating out of Bermuda, with customers largely or entirely outside of Bermuda. Clearly, international business, or IB as we refer to it, continues to grow and thrive and is hugely the driving force behind our economy. This is good news, and I give the Bermuda Monetary Authority the greatest praise in creating and maintaining a regulatory framework where insurance and reinsurance companies in particular, but all financial institutions governed by them, want to call Bermuda their home. Setting aside future risks and uncertainties, such as the global minimum tax issue, which was referenced in the budget, I am confident that this sector will continue to go from strength to strength. If the first bucket of taxpayers, Madam President, is international business, the second bucket is local business, retail, hospitality, and other businesses operating in Bermuda with Bermuda customers. I am less confident about the fortunes of future success for those businesses. In essence, their operating costs are increasing, but their revenues are not, at least not at the same pace. Madam President, there are generally considered to be three ways to improve a jurisdiction's finances. Number one is to increase revenues by increasing fees, i.e., for example, to increase the rate of payroll taxes, which was attempted about 15 years ago unsuccessfully, as it resulted in jobs leaving Bermuda and going onshore. I'm pleased to see in the 2023-2024 budget that this is not the case for employers, although we will observe over the coming year whether those employees in higher tax brackets who will be facing more out-of-pocket payroll taxes, often paid for by their employer, will cause jobs in Bermuda to again go onshore. Madam President, if increasing revenues by increasing fees is the first of three ways to improve our finances, then decreasing expenses is the second. Parties on both sides of the aisle have over many years been reluctant to address this. Redundancy of jobs in the civil services, particularly in a small community such as ours, is distasteful. And in addition, there aren't enough open positions in the private sector to accommodate the transfer of these jobs from the public to private sector if that did happen. Alas, Madam President, if increasing government fees isn't a good option, nor is reducing government expenses through civil service downsizing, then we are left with one alternative. Generate more economic activity by having more people in Bermuda paying into our tax system and using products produced by Bermuda businesses and services offered by Bermuda businesses and proprietors. This has often been a contentious issue in our community for whichever party is in power. I was very pleased to see the budget statement reference the need for more people in Bermuda, and I applaud the Minister of Economy and Labor for having said this publicly many times. What is missing in my view, although touched upon in the budget statement, was the economic recovery plan, which we are told is forthcoming. What is the game plan for attracting more people to Bermuda who will benefit local businesses by buying their products and using their services? These are my high-level comments on the budget, Madam President. I'll just briefly now comment on some of the other items that were noteworthy to me in the budget. In reviewing the larger ministries in particular, I was surprised to see the number of employees going up, not down, thereby increasing the cost of government. For example, the Department of Education, Head 17, is budgeting in the 2023-2024 year to increase the number of full-time staff by 36, from 1,034 to 1,070. The Department of Health is looking to add 5 new staff. Not a large number, but nonetheless, we are increasing, not decreasing, the costs of government in this regard. And while I highlighted education and health, which are our 2 largest ministries, I was also surprised at the expenditure increases for some of the smaller heads, such as Marine and Ports, which is going up year on year by 2.3 million, or 12%. On the revenue side of the equation, I was curious, Madam President, to see some of the assumptions for the coming year. In the Office of a Tax Commissioner, Head 38, I note that government is budgeting for additional receipts year over year of $59 million, or 13%. This seemed aggressive to me in light of the rate decreases that the Minister of Finance had presented. And while on the issue of the Office of the Tax Commissioner, Head 38, we know that tax collection has always been a thorny issue for Bermuda. And while the majority of businesses and individuals pay their taxes on time, we also know that many don't. The first department objective of the Office of a Tax Commissioner listed in the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 2023-2024 was to administer the collection of taxes and stamp duties in accordance with tax legislation. This makes perfect sense. There is no point in setting tax rules if we don't ensure that the taxes are actually collected. Yet when reviewing the performance measures for the department, the performance measure for reducing taxes owed to government has now been discontinued for the 2023-2024 year. This I don't understand. In summary, Madam Chair, I recognize that these are challenging times for Bermuda and for virtually every government around the globe. There's always a delicate balance for governments to budget expenditures, which they have 100% control over, versus the uncertainty of the revenues, which they anticipate they have forecasted appropriately. Madam President, we need, as a matter of some urgency, for the government to balance the budget and start to pay down, not increase, Bermuda's debt. I, along with every other Bermudian, and interested stakeholder will watch closer as the 2023-2024 year unfolds. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator John White. Senators, it's that time now. It's just 12:32, so we will now break for lunch until 2 o'clock. Senate stands adjourned until 2. Thank you.